At Home In, and this week we're at home in Liverpool. I'm Jayne Yates and I'm part of the Excursions Ltd team that design, plan and operate arrangements for Viking throughout the British Isles. I'm based at our Northern office and responsible for operations at our North of England ports, which include the Maritime Mercantile City of Liverpool.
Liverpool is a compact city with a population of around 1.5 million throughout the Liverpool city region. The city has a vast array of history, architecture, museums, galleries, sporting events and world-famous music and theatrical heritage. All of these factors have contributed to Liverpool's character, but it's the port that truly put Liverpool on the map. Until the 13th century, Liverpool was just a small village, not even big enough to have been mentioned in the Domesday Book of 1086. Liverpool is geographically well placed, and its location on the northwest coast of England, where the River Mersey meets the Irish Sea, made it an ideal place to establish a town and port. On the 28th of August 1207, King John of England granted Liverpool a royal charter. The king had a strategic purpose for a town and port at Liverpool. It was a good place from which he could send men and supplies to safeguard his interests in Ireland. Nowadays, when exploring the British Isles and surrounding areas by sea, Liverpool is at the heart of the British Isles maritime route, being just a short sail from Scotland, Ireland, Wales and the Isle of Man. By the 14th century, Liverpool had a population of around 1,000 people, and over the next few centuries steadily developed as a trading port. By the 17th century, the population had increased to around 2,000. Liverpool began to expand rapidly in the late 17th century with the growth of the colonies in North America and the West Indies. Again, Liverpool was geographically well placed, and it traded well with the new colonies just across the Atlantic. The infamous trade triangle of sugar, tobacco and slavery meant that Liverpool began to prosper and became the fastest growing city in the world. By 1821, the population of Liverpool had reached 118,000. 30 years later, in 1851, the city's boundaries had been extended and the population had more than trebled to 376,000 people. Liverpool was devastated by bombing during the Second World War. The city became a prime target for attack due to it, along with Birkenhead on the other side of the River Mersey, being Britain's largest west coast port. Britain depended heavily on supplies brought into Liverpool in convoys of ships from the US, Canada and the Commonwealth. These convoys of ships were being targeted by the enemy. In February 1941, combined operations moved from Plymouth to Derby House here in Liverpool, this fairly ordinary looking building behind me. The department based themselves in an underground bunker underneath here, and it was top secret. The department, working secretly beneath Derby House, became known as Western Approaches Command, as it monitored the coastal waters of the Atlantic Ocean lying immediately to the west of Ireland and the British Isles. Operations of the utmost secrecy and importance were carried out from Western Approaches Command, and Prime Minister Winston Churchill himself spent time here to lead these operations. Western Approaches headquarters was closed in 1945, and the bunker, or citadel as it was referred to then, was locked up. It remained unchanged and intact from the war years until 1993, when it was opened as Liverpool War Museum. Let's venture down into the citadel and find out more about these secret goings-on that were vital to Britain's victory in the Second World War. Inside Western Approaches Command is like stepping back in time. The typewriters and telephones you can see are the ones used by personnel of the Royal Navy, the Royal Air Force and the Marines during World War II. The map room remains as it was during the tireless toil of those stationed here, as do the living quarters and the radio rooms. Right here at Western Approaches played an integral part in the survival of Liverpool during the war. I'd like to hand over to Dave, stationed right here at Western Approaches, to tell you a little bit about it.
Welcome to Western Approaches headquarters. We are under the streets in Liverpool. We are about 25 feet in all money underground, and we're standing in what was the very heart of operations here. This is the main operations room within Western Approaches.
So Dave, why were Western Approaches here? Why was the command station brought up here to Liverpool?
So originally we were based in Plymouth, down on the south coast, And with the fall of France in 1940, the Channel becomes too dangerous and Liverpool becomes vital as the supply port, the main port of supplies for the whole of Britain against the Nazi war effort. So it was ordered by Churchill that Western Approaches Command, the RAF and the Royal Navy Command was moved here to Liverpool. One, to be close to the convoys and the port where all that action was going to be happening. But two, it was felt that it would be safer this far away from the German Air Force. Sadly, that wasn't true.
And Churchill actually worked here, didn't he? Churchill was here.
Yeah, so we know that on at least 2 occasions, Winston Churchill came to visit here. He saw this as a vital part of the war effort, and he saw this building as one of the most important places in that war effort.
And during the Second World War, sort of how many people would have been here? Because this is the main room, isn't it, where everything happened?
You're right. Now, this whole headquarters had to operate on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So there were roughly about 300 to 400 people working in here. They were working on 12-hour shifts with 4 hours on, 4 hours off. And the amazing thing is that 80% of the people that worked here were women. They were the young ladies of the Women's Royal Navy Service and the Women's Auxiliary Air Force, and they manned this and they made sure that this place ran. And not only that, but they had a big part to play in training the naval officers that were working in the Atlantic, fighting the U-boats and protecting the convoys.
So you said we're 25 feet underground. Was it very secret during the Second World War?
This place had to be top secret. Everybody who worked here signed the Official Secrets Act, which meant that you couldn't tell anybody what you did. And even you couldn't even tell your families. So local girls who were from Liverpool, they had to pretend that they were going to work in a shop and put their uniform on when they came in. They couldn't tell anybody about this. It had to be top secret. So much so that when the war ended, this place was closed down and we know very little about what happened to it, even then.
And how long was it actually sort of locked up?
So in August 1945, it was no longer needed, and for a week, the public of Liverpool were allowed to come in and visit and have a tour around, and then it was shut up. And really until the museum was opened in 1993, that's all we know about it. It was just left, the doors were locked, and that was it.
So all the equipment that we see, the typewriters, the telephones, they were just left there, the original. These have actually been handled by people that were involved in the war effort.
They have. We've had to bring in obviously some bits of furniture and things because you can imagine if it's been left for 70 years, some of it was going to be rotten away. But the telephones and things like that were just here, piled up. The one thing we do know is that all of this map behind me, that was all ripped out. That was all taken down. So it did become a bit dilapidated. It was a bit run down. But it must have been an amazing space at that point, just empty, barren, and as I say, big question marks over what happened.
Wartime Prime Minister, Right Honourable Winston Churchill.
Good morning.
Thank you for joining us, sir. Could you tell us a little bit about why Western Approaches was so important during the Second World War?
Well, here it was so important because we were losing ships at the terrible rate. The U-boat threat was one we needed to deal with. And here was an ideal situation for the Irish Sea and out into the Atlantic to deal with the threat. If we hadn't have dealt with it, we could have lost the war. We were losing ships, our material wealth was going on our food supplies, and Hitler knew it. And we had to deal with it. So it was here the wonderful people worked hard and we dealt with the issue. Had we not dealt with the Nazi threat, there would have been no D-Day landings from here and we would have possibly lost the war. So thank God we managed to deal with them, and that's how important it was. Without dealing with the U-boat threat, it could have been very serious consequences.
Well, thank you, Mr. Churchill.
If you've visited Liverpool before and you've arrived by sea, maybe on a Viking cruise, this is where you'll step ashore, at the pier head on the waterfront. It's about 200 metres from where you'll step off the gangway and about 500 metres from the centre of the city. You're right at the heart of Liverpool here. And this beautiful ship you can see in the background is the RRS Sir David Attenborough. From a small village on the tidal banks of the River Mersey, Liverpool has grown and evolved into the visually stunning world-class destination that you can see today. In 2004, Liverpool was granted UNESCO World Heritage status. Liverpool's inclusion by UNESCO was due to the city's supreme example of a commercial port at the time of Britain's greatest global influence. Within this vibrant city, there are 6 magnificent locations that comprise Liverpool's UNESCO World Heritage Site. This is Stanley Dock and it's part of Liverpool's remarkable maritime heritage. It's just one of the locations that make up Liverpool's UNESCO World Heritage Site. Opened in 1848 and it was used to store tobacco and rum. This huge building you can see behind me is the famous tobacco warehouse. Completed in 1901, it was the largest brick warehouse in the world. It took 27 million bricks to construct. Nowadays, Stanley Dock is undergoing major redevelopment. The North Warehouse, where rum was stored, is now the Titanic Hotel, a great place to stay if you visit Liverpool, and the tobacco warehouse is being converted into over 500 apartments. On Liverpool's famous waterfront, another of the city's UNESCO World Heritage Sites, stand the beautiful Three Graces: the Liver Building, the Cunard Building and the Port of Liverpool Building. All were built in the early 1900s and were the centrepiece of the river frontage when Liverpool was the second city of the British Empire. You can see how these magnificent historical buildings take centre stage on Liverpool's waterfront. A little further along the waterfront, about a 10-minute walk from the port, is the Royal Albert Dock. This is also one of the 6 locations that are part of Liverpool's UNESCO World Heritage Site. Comprised of dock buildings and warehouses, the Royal Albert Dock is the largest collection of Grade 1 listed buildings in Britain. It was designed by architects Jesse Hartley and Philip Hardwick. It took 5 years to build and was opened in 1846 by His Royal Highness Prince Albert, Queen Victoria's husband. In the 19th century, Liverpool dominated global trade and the docks here were right at the heart of it. Hartley's innovation and pioneering engineering meant that this Liverpool dock could function with maximum efficiency. There were dock gates that could maintain the water level regardless of the tide, which meant that ships could come along and load and unload directly in and out of the warehouses. There were pulley cranes that made loading and unloading much quicker and more efficient. The warehouses were constructed of cast iron, stone and brick, which meant that they were fireproof and they were secure. In fact, these were some of the first non-combustible warehouses ever to be built throughout the world. All of these factors meant that ships could turn around in half the time that they could previously. Trade increased, the merchants of Liverpool became very wealthy, and Liverpool thrived. Unfortunately, this prosperity was not to last. As the age of steam approached, ships got larger and unfortunately the Albert Dock was just too small to accommodate the larger ships. The dock was used for storage of valuable shipments, sugar, tobacco, alcohol, that sort of thing, and during World War II it was used for small warships and small submarines. The dock was very badly damaged during World War II and continued to decline from there on, until a major regeneration project in 1984. The Royal Albert Dock is a great place to stroll, shop, enjoy a coffee or maybe visit one of the museums. There are several museums at the dock, including the Maritime Museum, the International Slavery Museum, the Tate Liverpool and of course the Beatles story. For Beatles fans or for anyone with an interest in popular music, the Beatles story is a must. The museum is purely devoted to telling the story of the Beatles, and it will take you on a moving journey of the life and times of the 4 fairly ordinary young lads from Liverpool that were to become the phenomenal band, the Beatles. Liverpool's skyline is dominated by our 2 grand and very beautiful cathedrals. This is Liverpool's Anglican Cathedral. Magnificent, isn't it? The Anglican Cathedral, Cathedral Church of the Risen Christ, is the largest cathedral in Britain and it's the 5th largest in Europe. Construction began in 1904 when the foundation stone was laid by King Edward VII and continued through both World Wars, taking 74 years to build.
The cathedral is based on the design of the renowned architect Sir Giles Gilbert Scott. Gilbert Scott is known for his involvement in other famous works such as Battersea Power Station, and he designed the iconic British red phone box. Unfortunately, Gilbert Scott passed away in 1960 and didn't live to see the completion of the cathedral in 1978. Inside, the cathedral has many fascinating features, including the Lady Chapel, the oldest and probably the most beautiful part of the cathedral. There are memorials to celebrated heroes of Liverpool and the Great West Window, a modern addition to the cathedral. But it's the immense space inside the cathedral that is overwhelming.
At the opposite end of Hope Street, in total architectural contrast, we find what's known affectionately as Paddy's Wigwam. This is Liverpool's Metropolitan Cathedral. It's the Catholic cathedral and it's the largest Catholic cathedral in the country. It was opened in 1967 to serve the local Roman Catholic community.
The Metropolitan Cathedral to Christ the King is beautifully obtrusive, with its huge stained glass lantern tower and soaring concrete balusters. The cathedral's architect, Sir Frederick Gibbard, won an open design competition to build the cathedral. The competition had one crucial criterion: every member of the congregation must be able to see the altar. The ingenious architect designed a round cathedral with the altar at its centre. Liverpool's music scene, past and present, is unsurpassed, with many celebrated artists emerging from the city. At the heart of Liverpool's Merseybeat sound is Mathew Street. Here you'll find the famous Cavern Club and pub, the Wall of Fame and statues of famous Liverpool artists.
We're in Liverpool's famous Mathew Street. Just a few metres away is the Cavern Club and behind me is the Liverpool Beatles Museum. This museum houses a private collection of Beatles memorabilia and has a very special connection to the Beatles. Now usually Mathew Street is very, very busy with partygoers and revellers, but it's first thing in the morning here in Liverpool and the museum have arranged to open especially for us. So let's go in and have a look. Well, we're here inside the Liverpool Beatles Museum, and thank you, Rogue, for inviting Viking.TV to come and share some of your collection.
Pleasure.
I'd like to introduce, first of all, Rogue Best, owner, curator, guide, archivist, everything. Rogue, this is your museum.
Yeah, we opened 2 years ago. Well, when we were leading up to the museum, and we were saying this was 60 years in the making, 10 years in the planning, and another year in the doing. So 60 years of history wrapped up into 10 years of trying to find the right building, and then once we found it, it was a year of putting the whole thing together. So it's been busy times.
It's been a long journey, really, then, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, could we start first of all with you telling us about your connection with Beatles and what inspired you to put this wonderful collection together?
Well, the connection with the Beatles, my mother Mona Best was the owner of the Casbah Coffee Club, and the Casbah Coffee Club, which was actually where the Beatles formed as a group. They performed at the Casbah 2 years prior to playing the Cavern Club. People are becoming aware of that fact now, but the Casbah Coffee Club was the true birthplace of the Beatles, so my mother Mona Best gave them the kickstart. Then we have another connection. My father Neil Aspinall became their roadie, driving the Beatles to shows. Then he became their road manager when they went international, and finally became the managing director of Apple Corps, looking after the Beatles' business affairs. And then there's another connection. My eldest brother Pete Best, which some of you may know, and again through the Casbah, through our mother Mo, he became the original drummer for the Beatles, and he was a member of the Beatles for 2 years. Did over 1,000 performances, recorded 27 songs, so he was part of the original Beatles lineup. So we've got a lot of unique connections going on here.
Wow, so that expression, I was brought up on the Beatles, you really were,
I
weren't
was
you?
brought up on the Beatles, yes, most definitely. Yeah, I love this one on the 59 to 62 floor, because if you read all those Beatle books, the Beatles arrive in Hamburg, the black and white photographs, so you don't know this, but they're wearing lilac jackets. Pete's wearing a black jacket because he hasn't got a lilac jacket, but it's very much they're suited and booted. And then you look at the Beatle books and all of a sudden they're not suited and booted anymore. They've gone into leather. And the books, and I talk about books that have been written for over 40, 50 years now, give this thing of, so they went from this image to this image. Well, no, they didn't. And we like to bring things like this to people's attention within the Liverpool Beatles Museum. In between the suits and the leathers, the Beatles had a totally different image. They were wearing black and red ski jackets, one of which we've got here as an example, and black and white ski jackets with jeans. And the only reason people don't know about it, the only reason it's not in those books, is simply because no one photographed them with that image. So apart from showing people these rare, authentic, unique items, we also like to tell them parts of the history that they're not aware of. So that's why I like this one. Well, we discussed clothing. Obviously here at the museum we also have different musical equipment. So we have Paul's Selma microphone. This is one of the microphones Paul was using in 1961, and we've got a nice shot here to back that up. It's always nice to have a photograph to back up what you're saying. So we've got a nice shot here of Paul singing on that microphone, and of course we've also got Paul's bass cabinet. That was Paul's bass speaker cabinet he was using 60 and 1961. It wouldn't be used today because the speakers truly rotted away, but Paul was using that speaker 1960, 1961. Studio 2 Abbey Road, Studio 2 Abbey Road. Come on, the Beatles and Abbey Road goes hand in glove. But in Studio 2 they had playback speakers on the wall, so when the Beatles had recorded, they'd shout up to George, can we hear that playback? And these were the speakers they'd be played to the Beatles on, so they could hear what they were doing, what they were happy with the recording. And these are one of our recent finds, and when we found the speakers we thought, right, now let's cross-section them with the walls of Studio 2 and find our playback speakers on the walls. And we found photographs from 63 and went, oh, they're not our speakers. And then 64, they're not our speakers. 65, heart's starting to sing. These aren't speakers from Abbey Road Studios. 66, they changed the speakers and there they are on the wall. So 1966 onwards, when the Beatles were recording, these are the speakers they were listening to, what they were recording on. 1964 was a huge year for the Beatles. They go to America, and as we know, they smash America, and Beatlemania goes to another level. But when they first went out to America, they were assigned police officers to look after them, and the police officer in charge had to keep a police journal, and in that journal he notes them going to the Ed Sullivan Show, he talks about them going to Carnegie Hall. He's basically keeping a diary of the Beatles' first visit to America. The gentleman in question's son came into the museum, told us this story, and we said, wow, isn't it a pity that no one kept that police journal? And he said, oh, I've got it in a drawer. He said, would you like it? And we said, yes, we would. And off he went. And we thought, well, that's the last we've heard of that. And then the journal arrived about 4 weeks later. So there's this wonderful journal basically outlining the Beatles' first visit to the USA. And you can only see it here at the Liverpool Beatles Museum. 1967, the Beatles performed on the World Service, and that was an international broadcast, and it's where they performed All You Need Is Love for the first time. That was the Beatles' biggest audience. That night they were watched by 400 million people across the globe. And when All You Need Is Love starts, the camera shot is on this All You Need Is Love doll. It pans away from the All You Need Is Love doll, and there's the Beatles starting the song, and there's different shots of the boys here, again with the All You Need Is Love doll. They're sitting on its plinth behind them, but there's only one All You Need Is Love doll, and there was only one World Service, and there was only one time that they performed to 400 million people. But the whole thing, the broadcast started focused on the doll and moving away. You can only see that doll here. 1969, EMI is so happy with the Beatles. Every year they're giving them a unique Christmas present. In 1969, they gave each of the Beatles a custom-made egg chair. Custom-made because the egg chair had speakers all around the inside of it, so you could sit in your egg chair and have this surround sound playing to you. This one was John's egg chair, John Lennon's egg chair. It was his Christmas gift from EMI in 1969. But Paul got one, George got one, and Ringo got one. Where the other 3 egg chairs are, I don't know. But this is John's.
Well, Rogue, thank you so much for sharing some of your amazing collection of Beatle memorabilia. Well, it's not really memorabilia, a lot of them are actually family heirlooms, aren't they?
They are. But it's been lovely having you here today, and I look forward to seeing more of you and more of your guests.
Thank you so much. We look forward to seeing you very soon.
Thank you.
Fonseca is my favourite Liverpool restaurant. There are about 300 restaurants, and that's not counting the coffee shops, bakeries, patisseries in Liverpool, so you really are spoilt for choice. But here is not just a restaurant, it's an absolute haven for foodies.
Fonseca is a small independent company with a philosophy of enjoying an exciting range of beautifully cooked, nutritious food, accompanied with good wine and having fun whilst enjoying in a friendly, relaxed atmosphere. At Fonseca Dockside, about a mile from the port, you can find a fabulous restaurant with an extensive delicatessen. Fonseca was created by owner Candice Fonseca. Candice's passion for all things food related led her to create a restaurant and deli that she herself would like to eat and shop in, hence this place to enjoy an amazing gastronomic experience.
The city of Liverpool has so much to offer, and it doesn't end there. North Wales is just a stone's throw away from Liverpool. The Lake District and the Peak District, where you'll find Chatsworth House, are just a scenic drive from Liverpool. All around the outskirts of the city are amazing stately homes to explore. Tatton Park, Arley Hall, Dunham Massey, to name but a few. I'd like to share with you one of those special stately homes, a lesser known and certainly lesser visited place. Knowsley Hall. This is Knowsley Hall, ancestral home to the 19th Earl and Countess of Derby. Generally, Knowsley Hall doesn't accept visitors, but with very privileged access, we can go and have a look inside. Well, we're here inside Knowsley Hall in the library, and I'd like to introduce to you Dr. Stephen Lloyd, and he is the curator of the Derby collection here at Knowsley.
Thank you, Jane. I'll just tell you a little bit about my role. It's obviously this great stately home belonging to the Earls of Derby, and a great stately home will have a great art collection. And so my role here is both to look after the paintings, the decorative arts, the portraits, the watercolours, the ceramics, all aspects of the art collection. But we're here in the library because I look after the great library here, a collection of books. And Knowsley is particularly famous for its natural history collection of watercolours. We've got about 9,000 watercolours here. Animals, mammals, birds, insects, shells, still lives, you name it. And these great cabinets are full of albums formed really by the 13th Earl in the early 19th century. And he was a great naturalist and natural historian. He had a huge menagerie and aviary of exotic animals here. And he famously commissioned the young Edward Lear, a great famous obviously for his nonsense poems, which he wrote here to entertain the grandchildren of the 13th Earl. But also he came here to paint in watercolours the exotic birds and animals which have been brought from all over the world to his private zoo here. So this is a great privilege to look after this collection, and I am in contact with scholars from all over the world who know about this collection, and we do show it occasionally to special guests, parts of the collection, including the Edward Lears, which are really the glory of the collection.
Good morning, Lord Derby, and thank you so much for inviting Viking.TV into your lovely home to show us around. Now, can I just try to start at the beginning? You are the 19th Earl of Derby,
And Knowsley Hall has been your ancestral home for around 600 years. So could you tell us sort of how it all began?
I can tell you how it all began. It all began with a very good marriage. One of my forebears, who were called Stanley in those days, and just as Earl of Derby, I'm head of the Stanley family, but it was a very good marriage, and his wife, Isabel de Latham, brought this wonderful house into the family. That was back in 1385. And needless to say, it's been much changed over the centuries since then. But it's quite extraordinary and very humbling to be part of a family whose history has followed so much the history of Britain. What do I mean by that? Lord Stanley, at the Battle of Bosworth Field, his army was bigger than the King's or Richard III's. He was married to Lady Margaret Beaufort, mother of Henry Richmond, and he was Lord High Steward in Richard III's household. So which way he went was going to decide the battle. He decided he'd wait a little bit on the sidelines and decide, and as Shakespeare says, King Richard III charged into a boggy bit of ground, my horse, my kingdom for a horse. And then Lord Stanley crowns him, we're raised to the earldom of Derby. It's not always a good story, because in the Civil War, when Oliver Cromwell was in charge of Britain in the mid-1600s, my forebears were royalists, and the 7th Earl was beheaded in Bolton. And to this day, they still have a reenactment of his beheading. But the family played an extraordinary part in history. The courtesy title used by the family for the oldest son was Lord Strange, and William Shakespeare was one of Lord Strange's players. Midsummer Night's Dream was premiered for one of my forebears. And we look at horse racing. The 12th Earl founded the Derby, which happened at Epsom, very close to his house called the Oaks, the name of the second of our 5 classics. And his son was a great natural historian and travelled all around the world. And that's the point at which we bring in Edward Lear, who wrote all the nonsense rhymes to entertain the grandchildren and the great-nephews and the great-nieces here at Knowsley. It must have been extraordinary to think of the Owl and the Pussycat being told to young children. They must have been just fascinated. And this man painted the extraordinary menagerie and all the wonderful parrots and parakeets and the different mammals that were here. My family then took a very political turn. The 14th Earl, a classic scholar at Oxford, Chancellor of Oxford, 3 times Prime Minister. And I'm extraordinarily proud of him, because Knowsley Hall, very close to the docks in Liverpool, the Liverpool City region, where we're hoping many Viking ships will come into. But he was the man who said, I am going to go into politics to abolish slavery. And when Liverpool was a big slaving city, well, that was a very significant move to make. His son was Foreign Secretary. You find Port Stanley in the Falkland Islands, Fort Stanley in Hong Kong. Stanley Park came from his younger brother, who was Governor General of Canada, and gave Canada the Stanley Cup, their ice hockey trophy, still one of the biggest sporting trophies that there is. So I come from a long line of family history, and my wife and I have spent the last quarter of a century together trying to restore Knowsley Hall back to what it is today, which we think is a very, very special place to come and visit for exclusive events, family occasions. And we really enjoy telling people, letting them into this weird and wonderful world that we're privileged enough to be a part of.
Thank you for joining me on this brief introduction to Liverpool. And remember, however cool that breeze that flows from the Mersey, there's always a warm welcome waiting for you here in Liverpool. We look forward to seeing you soon. Hello, well, I'm out of that lovely fresh crisp breeze from the River Mersey, and I'm indoors in the office and here to answer a few questions that are coming in online. So our first question is from Lindsay O'Reilly in San Diego, California, US. Hi, Lindsay. And Lindsay's asking, is it possible to walk around Liverpool and see the main sites? Yes, indeed it is. Liverpool is a very compact city. It's very easy to find your way around, and lots of the sites are in the city centre. They're very close together, so yes, it's very easy to walk, and within about a mile radius of the port, you could walk to 4 of the UNESCO World Heritage Sites, as well as many of the other fabulous sites. And our Maritime City of Liverpool tour incorporates that walk, concentrated on the sort of city centre, the waterfront, with many of the city's highlights. Next question then from Charlie Gregson, and Charlie's in Atlanta, Georgia, US. And Charlie's asking, are the Beatles still popular in the UK and in Liverpool? Yes, absolutely, Charlie. Still very, very popular. There's still lots of Beatles things going on in Liverpool, lots of Beatles bars. You will hear Beatles music all around the city. You will hear buskers playing Beatles music. And of course, usually towards the end of each August, we have International Beatles Week, which is fabulous. It's like a Beatles festival, and you get lots of sort of lookalike groups and everything. So yes, the Beatles is still very much happening in Liverpool. Moving on, next question, Naomi Ward, and Naomi is in Chicago, Illinois in the US. And Naomi's asking, is the shipyard where Titanic was built open to visitors? Yes, it is, Harland and Wolff, but the Harland and Wolff shipyard is actually in Belfast, not Liverpool. However, there are some very strong connections between Titanic and Liverpool, and often the building of the Titanic is associated with Liverpool, but it was actually built in Belfast at Harland Wolff. Now, those connections are that the registration of the ship was registered in Liverpool. So when you see pictures of Titanic and you see the bow and the aft end, it actually has Liverpool written on it because the ship was registered in Liverpool. And it was owned by the White Star Line, which later on amalgamated with Cunard. But White Star Line was based in Liverpool. Their head office was 1 street back from the waterfront, and then obviously they moved into the Cunard building when they merged with Cunard. So because of those ties, we often think of Titanic, oh, it was from Liverpool, but it wasn't actually built in Liverpool. It's built at Harland and Wolff in Belfast. Now, the shipyard in Belfast, you can't really go and visit it, but there is an absolutely superb Titanic museum in Belfast. If you're ever in Belfast, it's a must. It's a fantastic place to visit. Try and get there when you visit Belfast. Next question then, we have Greg Seymour from Windsor in the UK. Hi Greg, if you take a ferry across the Mersey, what can you do on the other side of the river? Oh, lots. The ferry across the Mersey takes you over to Seacombe. You go from the pier head, which is very close to the port where you'll leave your cruise ship, and it takes you over to Seacombe. Once you get onto the Wirral Peninsula, lots to do. Probably my 2 favourite things over there are Port Sunlight Village, which is like an industrial garden village, which was created by Lord Leverhulme for his workers at his soap factory, and we often refer to Port Sunlight as the village that was built on soap. But it's such a beautiful, unique place with all these sort of picture box houses where the workers lived, and they had a school and a social club and a pub and tennis courts and everything. So they had quite a nice life there. So it's a very interesting place to visit. My other place on the Wirral Peninsula that I like to go to is Ness Gardens. Ness Gardens, fabulous, beautiful botanic garden, which was created by a guy called Kipling Bully, and he was one of the famous plant collectors of the 20th century. So 2 great things, a few other things, but they're my 2 favourite things to see on the Wirral Peninsula. If you were to visit the Wirral, I would advise going by the tunnel, because it's just easier then to get to the attractions. If you arrive at Seacombe Ferry Terminal, you would then have to get onward transport to those attractions. But something I must tell you, if you do take a ferry over the Mersey, the best view of Liverpool is from the other side of the river. If you are sailing into Liverpool, the best view is from the water, so don't miss it. If you're sailing up that River Mersey, get out on the deck and have a look, because the sail into Liverpool is absolutely amazing. And if you do take a tour that takes you over to any of the tours on the Wirral, they'll stop somewhere if they can to show you the view of the Three Graces and the waterfront on the other side of the river. It's fabulous. Okay, moving on, we have Stephanie. Stephanie Vickers is in Richmond, Virginia in the US. Hi, Stephanie. Is it possible to join a tour and a service at the Anglican Cathedral when the ship docks in Liverpool? Yes. The Anglican Cathedral is it's actually included on the iconic Liverpool tour, which is an inclusive tour that we have for our Viking programmes. And you would get a chance to actually go inside the Anglican Cathedral and have a little bit of a guided tour and have a look around. Visitors are welcome to join services, and the services at the cathedral are absolutely amazing because of the Anglican choir and the huge organ and the huge space and everything. It really is, it's a beautiful, beautiful cathedral and a great place to attend a service. Sometimes we have to work around things like graduation ceremonies. Sometimes there is abseiling. Yes, we have people abseiling down the side of the cathedral, but we can usually work around them. But yes, certainly you will have the opportunity to go inside the Anglican Cathedral, and it is absolutely amazing. I've been going in there for years, and I never once step in there without going, oh, wow! It's just the space. It's absolutely immense. It's wonderful. It's a wonderful place to visit. Next question then from Angie Chapman in Columbus, Ohio in the US. Was much of Liverpool badly damaged, badly destroyed during World War II? Yes, Angie. Unfortunately, Liverpool suffered absolutely catastrophic damage during the Second World War. It was the most bombed city, or the most bombed city in Britain, apart from London, during the Second World War. Suffered immense damage. 4,000 civilians or thereabouts lost their lives. 90,000 homes were destroyed. A lot of the docks, there were 7 miles of docks in Liverpool that were operating throughout the war, and they were targeted, and a lot of them were very, very badly damaged. And because Liverpool is a compact city, many of the sort of residential areas were very close to the docks. There were literally hundreds of streets of red brick terraced houses running down to the docks, and of course all the people that worked in the docks and the factories on the docks and the warehouses lived in these terraced streets. And when the docks were bombed, then all these streets went as well. They were all bombed. Most of the bombing took place by the Luftwaffe during the night when it was dark. So obviously the bombs and anything around it, so the city centre, people's houses, it was all very, very damaged, unfortunately, during the Second World War. Yes, but it's all part of our history. Okay, moving on then to Steve Allen. Hi Steve. Steve in Detroit, Michigan, US. I've heard that Liverpool is known as home to Europe's largest or longest established Chinese community and boasts a Chinese arch. Is it correct? Yes, indeed. Liverpool is home to Europe's longest and most established Chinese community. And we do have the largest Chinese arch outside of mainland China, which was a gift from Shanghai. And Shanghai is one of the cities that is twinned with Liverpool. So yes, and it's absolutely magnificent. And you're sort of driving along and then you see this huge Chinese arch, and it really is amazing. And of course, the celebrations, Chinese New Year in Liverpool is absolutely amazing. So next, moving on to Jude Denver in Newark, New Jersey, US. Do the sites made famous in the Beatles songs really exist? Yeah, they do. Is there really a barbershop in Penny Lane, and is it still there? Yes. Sometimes it's not a barbershop, sometimes it lies empty, but basically the barbershop on Penny Lane, it's not actually on Penny Lane, it's actually on Smithdown Road, but that's very close to Penny Lane. It's sort of on the corner of Penny Lane.
and the barber's shop is on a sort of traffic island and a bus shelter in the middle of the road, and it is still there. And I think there's usually signs up saying, you know, this is the barber shop and that featured in the Penny Lane song. But yes, that is still there, and on your Beatles experience tour this will be pointed out. Other places, Strawberry Field is definitely still there, and a fabulous new heritage centre was opened last year at Strawberry Field, which of course was the Salvation Army's children's home, where John Lennon used to climb over the fence and play in the garden. So there's a heritage centre there, and there's the Peace Garden, and that's a fabulous place to live. That is certainly there. Eleanor Rigby, she is there, or her statue. There's a statue of Eleanor on Stanley Street. She's there, certainly. So yes, and on the Beatles tours and on the Liverpool tours, you'll hear all about these places, these many places that were frequented by the Beatles and that they wrote songs about. Okay, James Waits and Toledo, Ohio, US. Oh, great programme, Jane. Thanks very much. I have a family from Liverpool and it's very interesting to see. Well, thank you, James. That's lovely. Thanks very much. Hope to see you over here to join your family. Okay, Rachel in Nottingham, but Nottingham, New York, US. I'm a big fan of the Beatles. What is your favourite song? Oh, Rachel, this is a hard one. This is a really hard one. I think I would have to say I'd have to say two. I can't say one. My two favourite Beatles records, She Loves You and Revolution. I love Revolution. They're my two favourite songs. Yeah, fabulous. But I like all the Beatles songs, but if I had to pick two, they would be my favourites. Okay, Nicholas Alley. Hi, Nicholas. You're in San Francisco, California, US. Your question is, Lord Derby has a wonderful home. How much of the house that stands today existed when it was first built? Well, historians tell us that right from the 12th century, there was some sort of building on the site that belonged to the Stanley family. There have been a few changes over the years, and around the year 1495, 1500, there was an older part of the building which still stands now. It's sort of like the reddy sandstone coloured building. And after that, there were additions made as time went on. Remember, this is a family home, so as any family would maybe, you know, put a conservatory on or extend a little bit, or renovate to preserve the building. This is what's happened with Knowsley Hall over the years. But if you visit, you'll be able to see the sort of different brickwork of the two main parts of the building. You can see which is the older part and which is the newer, more modern part. But Knowsley Hall, it's a huge place, and there is ongoing work to maintain it and keep it beautiful, which it is. It is very beautiful. Next one then, Jason Lean from Durham. From Durham, North Carolina. I was thinking Durham, UK. From Durham, North Carolina in the US. Hi, Jason. Who will be the next Earl of Derby? Well, our Earl of Derby now is the 19th Earl of Derby, and his son, Edward, will become the 20th Earl of Derby. The Earl and the Countess of Derby have 3 children. Lord Stanley, who is Edward, who will be the next Earl, Lady Henrietta, and Oliver, who is the Honourable Oliver Stanley. Stanley, of course, is the family name, but the next, the 20th Earl of Derby will be Edward, Lord Derby's eldest son. And moving on to James MacDonald from Boston, Massachusetts in the US. Can you tell us what sort of exhibitions you can see at the Tate Liverpool? Certainly, modern contemporary at the Tate. It's the trendy museum. It's the gallery that they hope to sort of encourage young people to get interested in art. But probably I think the best thing about Tate Liverpool is the exhibitions that they have, the temporary exhibitions. There's always something very, very interesting. At the moment, they've got a Don McCullum exhibition, and this is photographs from the 60s and 70s in Liverpool and other northern towns. So they have sort of things like that are Really good to see, really interesting, and sort of things that we can recognise. You know, you see an exhibit in a museum and the children are wearing jumpers that we used to wear. So it's that kind of sort of contemporary modern museum.
Nick Wright, Ottawa, Canada. Hi Nick, is asking, other than the Beatles Museum, where else should a fan visit in Liverpool? Can you visit the Cavern Club and Penny Lane? Yes, you can. The Beatles Museum and the Royal Albert Dock, fabulous collection, definitely go and visit. The Liverpool Beatles Museum, which has family collections of memorabilia, definitely go and visit. Other places you can visit apart from them, the Cavern Club, yes, it's about a 10 or 15 minute walk from the port. Penny Lane, as I mentioned before, is included on our Beatles Experience tour. Another place, if you're an avid fan, you might want to visit is the Casbah Coffee Club. The Casbah is only open by special appointment, but we can actually arrange that through our Viking Tours programme. The Casbah Coffee Club, as you probably are aware of, is where the Beatles started from, really. It was their first sort of place where they were gigging. And the Casbah Coffee Club was bought and owned by Mona Best. And Mona Best was the mother of Roe Best, the guy you'll have seen earlier on at the Liverpool Beatles Museum. And his mum bought this house in West Derby on the outskirts of Liverpool and converted her cellar into a place where young people could come and play their music and enjoy themselves and be safe, and maybe she just wanted to keep an eye on her boys and their friends. But this is where the Beatles and other Merseybeat bands came to start off gigging and playing in this sort of cellar in the Casbah Coffee Club, and it's sort of as it was then, very authentic. You really do get the feel of it. And some of the interior decoration, well, I say interior decoration, it was decorated by John Lennon, Paul McCartney and George Harrison. They all had a little bit of input because Mona Best asked them to decorate it. You're going to play your gigs here, so you can do a little bit of the decorating. And some of the things are actually signed by the boys from the Beatles. So that's a really good place to visit. You can also visit the Beatles childhood homes, which now belong to the National Trust. They're very busy. Only very small groups can visit them because they're just sort of 3-bedroomed family homes. They're not big museums, they're just ordinary houses. But it's where John Lennon and Paul McCartney actually lived. And we can arrange tours to them. We do have to book them quite far in advance because only small groups of people can go with them, and their expert guides can show them where Paul McCartney's bedroom was, and he used to sit on his bed and play his guitar, etc. So yeah, quite a few other places that as an avid Beatles fan you really must see in Liverpool. Julia Kloss from Manchester in UK. Hi Julia, is asking, who founded the current museum at Knowsley Hall? Did they have a personal connection to anyone that worked there? Well Julia, the fascinating thing about the collection at Knowsley Hall is it's been collected by the Stanley family. The portraits are all of the Stanley family. The archives are belonging to the Stanley family, who of course played a very big part, not just in the sort of land area around Liverpool and Cheshire, but also nationally. And this goes back to sort of late medieval time and the War of the Roses, and of course all the archives of all this history is stored at Knowsley Hall. And the Earls, as you know, we're up to the 19th Earl of Derby. All of the Earls were characters and all had something very interesting to leave behind in the history. For example, the 13th Earl of Derby was very good friends with Edward Lear, and a lot of Edward Lear's art is part of the collection at Knowsley. So it wasn't really a purposely created collection. It's been gathered over the years by generations and generations of the Stanley family, and it's quite fascinating.